Hi, I'm Julie Chapman. I'm excited to share information with you about elevating your cyber career. A little bit about me. I am an information security leader and military veteran with over 20 years of experience in the federal government and in the private sector. My specialties include cybersecurity, cyber policy and strategy, and risk management. This information sharing session talks about communication. However, communication is one of many cyber career differentiators. Other cyber career differentiators include understanding the business, connecting with leadership, focus and problem solving, and cyber certifications. So understanding the business is really developing the mindset where you can see a clear line of sight between your activities as a cyber practitioner and the outcomes that your organization is seeking, the business outcomes. Connecting with leadership refers to being able to figure out what matters to your leaders and tailoring your activities and your communication with those things and demonstrating that you are someone that consistently does that. Focus and problem solving means being known as someone who is able to break a complex situation down into digestible parts, figure out the strategies and tactics towards solving a problem, and having a reputation for being able to consistently deliver on that. Last but not least, the cyber certifications. There is a lot of strong opinion on the utility of cyber certifications in the cybersecurity community. So we will be talking about all of these. But again, today's information sharing session is about communication. Before diving in, I want to pause to show that cybersecurity is a wonderful field to get into. There is so much opportunity. It's a diverse field with a lot of different subspecialties, which whatever your personality type or natural abilities or skill sets, there is a domain in cybersecurity for you. This is a graphic that I love to use. It's called Cyber Domains. This is version 3.0 by Henry Jiang, and it shows the diversity of cyber. Right in the middle in yellow, we've got frameworks and standards, and that's things like NIST Cybersecurity Framework and NIST Risk Management Framework, ISO, things like that. At 1 o'clock, we've got application security and all the subdomains. At 2 and 3 o'clock, we have risk assessments and enterprise risk management. In green on the lower right, we have governance. Following it around, we have threat intelligence, user ed, security operations. We have IoT security connected to physical security at 9 o'clock, very exciting. And then rounding everything out, we've got career development and security architecture. So looking at the domains and subdomains, this is a very diverse field with opportunities for everyone. For the purpose of this session, I've bucketed cyber skill sets into 3 major categories. The first is technical skills. The second is research and analysis. And the last is communication, which is what we're talking about here. So thinking about technical skills, things that come to mind could be writing code, working on networks, working as a system administrator, perhaps being a pen tester. Considering research and analysis, things which come to mind could be looking at logs, maybe user logs to analyze user behavior, seeing patterns there, threat intelligence work, forensic work, or being the person that analyzes laws and regulations and makes sure that our organization is compliant, or figuring out how laws and regs affects the organization and the cyber environment. So communication happens verbally, like help desk, someone calls a help desk, my computer's not working, and being the person that walks, the tier 1 person that walks them through the solution. You could also be involved in user education, giving talks, chats, trainings. And 2 of the most common ways that cybersecurity guidance and cyber guidance is delivered to users is through policies and SOPs. So thinking about policies, they are typically based on an organization's strategy, goals, objectives, things like that. You also have laws and requirements from oversight bodies. As such, policy doesn't change very frequently because strategy is a long-term view. Policies are very broad, and they are typically influenced by an organization's risk appetite. Pausing here to discuss risk appetite for a moment. Think of risk appetite as an organizational perspective on risk. Just how much risk are we as an organization comfortable with taking on? That's the simplest definition. So policies based on strategy, goals, objectives, laws, requirements, infrequent changes, broad in general, and associated with risk appetite. Looking in the thought bubble, there's a sample policy statement. Notice that it says that something must happen, it shall happen, but it doesn't give a lot of detail about how, when, or where. Okay. So going to standard operating procedures. These are different documents than policies. These are based on operations. They are very tactical, and as such, they should continuously improve and change quite often. They offer a detailed description of activities in the business lines, and they are influenced by risk tolerance. So remember, we just talked about how risk appetite is an organizational orientation towards risk. Risk tolerance is below that level. They could be, think of risk tolerance being connected to specific metrics or specific programs within an organization. And it's basically individual wiggle room, right? But it all feeds up to how the whole organization looks at risk. So with SOPs, if you look in the thought bubble, if you are involved in creating SOPs, you have to communicate with the users in a way that they can understand. They need to know when something is mandatory and when it's discretionary. And so in the thought bubble, we have some samples. Must and shall can be used to communicate when something is mandatory. It must happen, it shall happen. Preferred but not mandatory, you can use the word should. And if something is discretionary, may or can work. Pausing here for a question. Thinking back to the cyber domain 3.0 map that we just saw, what has the most impact on risk across all of those domains? And the answer is users. Why am I saying that? Well, think of it like this. The cybersecurity folks can implement the most technologically advanced mitigation or protection mechanism to a network or a system. It will take a user a few seconds to defeat whatever that is. The user can click a link, insert a piece of removable media, visit a site, open an attachment, anything. And now we're in incident response. So remember, users are the center of the cyber universe. During the live session on this topic, we had a really good discussion about policies and SOPs. And we talked about the policies and SOPs that you just wanted to throw away, right? 1 star on Yelp. And the common themes around those were too much jargon, confusing, not updated and not kept relevant to the work, and of course, too long. You know, some people, they read the policy or the SOP and they end up more confused than before when they read it. So that's not good, right? We also talked about policies and SOPs, which were helpful, which actually worked. And common themes for those were succinct, clear, easy to understand, kept up to date, and directly connected to what was happening on the ground, if it's an SOP, or the direction we're going, if it's a policy. Pausing for another question. You are the cybersecurity lead in human resources, and your director wants to implement a technology which is non-compliant with your organization's cybersecurity policy. What do you do? Now, this was a really good part of the discussion in the live session, and some folks shared some really interesting approaches. One approach was, I'm going to tell the HR director that that's not allowed. Another approach was, I'm reporting this to the CIO and CISO, or at least the CISO. Now, after 20 years in the life, I have to say that I have seen both of these approaches or some variation of them actually used in the workplace. And I've got to tell you, without exception, the results were suboptimal. During the live session, we talked it through, and here's what we came up with. We are the cybersecurity lead in service of this HR department, right? And the director, the person at the very top wants to do this. Speak to them. Figure out what's going on. It's possible that the HR director came across the technology, listening to the radio, heard it on a commercial, or saw it in an ad and didn't really look any further, thought it was cool and it would work and didn't look any further. It's possible. So you got to talk and you got to figure out what's the outcome that the HR director wants. Is there a technology or on the organization's approved software list which produces the same result, but it's approved and it's in compliance? If that's not the case, is it possible to run the technology through the approval cycle and get it on the APL, the approved software list? I mean, there's so many variations to problem solving depending on the situation. But as cyber professionals, we want to be about the problem solving, not the blocking. Okay. This was also a lot of fun during the live session. We did role playing here, but what you can do to really up your game in cyber is try this. Each of these 3 words or phrases, cloud computing, malware, multi-factor authentication, find someone that has no vocabulary in cyber or cybersecurity and explain these terms to them. And wherever they say, huh, or what, or they have an inquisitive look on their face during your explanation, that indicates that you need to break it down further. If you can master this skill, you will be differentiating yourself. You will be known as a cyber professional who's easy to talk to, who understands the business, and who can break down technical jargon into simple terms that relate to business. So again, this information sharing session was about communication and figuring out ways to maximize your value as a cyber professional in your organization. During the live session, we asked the attendees to vote on which of the remaining 4 topics did they want to see next. We will cover all 4, but we want to give some priority. And the one that floated to the top was focus and problem solving. So that is what will be coming up next. If you have questions or feedback, please email me at cybercareerdifferentiators@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you in one of the future live sessions.